Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Vince Molinaro, and I'd like to welcome you to the Lead the Future podcast. In this episode, I'm thrilled to have Pam Slim as my guest, and we're going to be exploring her ideas in her newest book, The Widest Net. Pam is an award-winning business coach, a speaker, and is the author of a book that really influenced me a lot, Body of Work, and her first book, which was a smash hit, Escape from Cubicle Nation. And Pam has spent the last 2 decades really working with thousands of entrepreneurs worldwide to really help them understand how to start, sustain, and scale their businesses. And in her book, Pam really talks about how we can unlock potential markets in our own businesses and drive new customers that could be right in front of our eyes, but we really don't know how to even see them, how to connect with them, and how to build relationships with them. So welcome, Pam. Thanks for making time for our Lead the Future podcast.
Thanks for having me.
What motivated you to write The Widest Net?
I really describe myself as an author practitioner. I sometimes get jealous of my author friends that just come up with really cool ideas and write books on them. In writing The Widest Net, I realized really partway through writing the book that it is kind of a trilogy in the books that I've written. First, for Escape from Cubicle Nation, for folks who were not happy in a corporate environment, who wanted to leave to work for themselves. That was an important shift that people would take just to get in the work configuration of working for themselves. After that, generally, there's a process of introspection where people say, what really do I want to create in my body of work? What is my point of view? What's my intellectual property? And folks get really clear on that. The natural question that I heard over and over and over from both entrepreneurs as well as organizations who are looking to grow new markets or recruit people from different communities was, where are my people? How do I find them? What's a way I can find them? And so it just became this really pressing question that for me, I realized was actually something I'd been working on for over 30 years. And that's really how it came about.
First, let's talk about ecosystems. How do you define them? Why are they important for us as entrepreneurs and business leaders to be thinking about that concept?
So in just a little bit of a contrast of ideas, in general in the book, I talk about an empire culture in some ways that we're socialized to think about marketing, which is we build up our empire. We're really trying to draw people to us. And in that kind of concept, of course, all of us in our own businesses and organizations want to be excellent. We want to be known for being the best. We want to communicate that clearly to our customers. But in that model, we tend to really look at the people who come to follow our work as being literally fans and followers. That's the way that we often describe people in that way. We're trying to draw them to us. By contrast, an ecosystem model is really centering our ideal client or customer and saying they already live in this ecosystem where they're looking for places in person, online, resources to solve the core problem that you and your company also solve. And when I began to really look into it, I found 10 different segments in what I call the ecosystem wheel. That's the model in the book. And these can be places, in my experience, that people actually do go look for support. So sometimes it's with other service providers, professional services providers that are helping them also. In the case of my own clients who are trying to grow their business or expand their audience, they're working with CPAs and intellectual property attorneys and graphic designers. They're also listening to thought leaders. They're reading other people's books. They might be listening to media hubs, podcasts like this one to get information. And for many of them, they're also utilizing products that also help them to solve a particular business problem. So my premise within The Widest Net is, instead of only thinking, how can I just pull everybody into my empire? Instead, I actually think it's a bit easier to look for places where other wonderful people have already built up substantial community. I call them watering holes within this ecosystem, where when we begin to reach out and partner with the people who really have created those watering holes, that's where you get really a one-to-many kind of impact. And that's where you see partnerships. That's where you see, sharing events, doing a lot of co-marketing. It is a lot of work up front in order to really figure out where are those best places. But once you know where they are, it's a very effective way to build a business.
What's the one example where you go, they really nailed this concept in practice?
Probably, I always hesitate to say favorite client because it's almost like you can't say that with your with your children
I never said
or
that.
with clients. But Heather Krause, who is a data scientist in Toronto, Canada, uh, created an initiative which is called We All Count. That was a new business idea. She had done data science as an independent consultant, had worked for years with many different organizations. And in particular, the real problem that she was looking to solve was that there is a lot of inequity, systemic inequity within the process of data science, with the way that people collect data. And she, in her practice, had really discovered a particular approach to how it is that data scientists could reduce that bias. And she ended up creating what's called We All Count, which is a training organization, consulting organization that trains other data scientists. And she is a self-professed huge introvert. So when I started suggesting things like reach out and talk to somebody in your field that's a good ecosystem partner and just have a 15 or 20-minute conversation, she initially was very uncomfortable and resistant. But like happens with many folks that I work with, the mission of what she was trying to do was so important that she overcame some personal discomfort in order to do that seating and connecting. And within a relatively, short period of time, over a couple of years, she's built a world-renowned training organization. She's trained hundreds of data scientists, works with some of the biggest universities and foundations in the world. And I just find it pretty magical to be able to see something from inception all the way through to where she is now.
It really is about relationships and community, which is
Yeah.
something you also dive into in quite a bit of depth. So, give me your sense of how you think about that and what's important around the idea of community.
Yeah. So in thinking about the structure of an ecosystem, so we can say, and I define it when you, for your business, are really defining the ecosystem that surrounds your clients, it is vetted by shared values. So it's not necessarily every single person in the ecosystem who might be providing a product or a service. It's those also who are aligned with your values. So that in some ways is where you can see the what and who of who the players are. Community and the feeling of community is really how it is that we relate, how it is that we think about our relationship with each other. And my best friend, Desiree Adaway, who I mentioned in the book a couple of times, she's always talked about the difference between transactional versus relational culture. And in transactional business culture, we sometimes can fall into the habit of literally talking about our customers as numbers, as
Right.
views, as numbers of followers, conversion rates. And we all know we have the analytical side of our business that we need to look into that's very important. But really, when you do see in a relational way that everybody who is impacted within this ecosystem, again, centered around solving a really core problem. When I think about your work of building organizations that have accountable leaders, and having been a management consultant for 10 years, I know so personally and up close what it's like when both you have that kind of a culture and also when you don't have that culture. Really, the feeling of community is that we share a purpose and a passion for solving that problem. That could include people who are inside those organizations. Those can be leaders, those can be other service providers, your peers and colleagues that write books on leadership and talk about it. And to me, commerce exists within the ecosystem. The feeling you have, the connection is we're in this together and we're interested in solving the problem. The commerce comes when you say, oh, there's a financial interest and a business reason for us to be doing something business related to solve this problem together. So that's why in a community, you can have people who have a financial relationship with each other and people who don't. But it's more that relational feeling that we're all in here together in order to solve a common problem.
As you were describing that, I just went to what's happening now with the Great Resignation. And have you had any reflections on that? Because in many ways, some of those themes are really relevant to today. Have you made that connection at all in terms of what most people are really, they're trying to escape this world of offices that we've had in a pretty dramatic way right now?
I do. Maybe there's a tiny bit of smugness. You know how to. I might have said I told you so to
Okay,
myself
let's
a
have
couple
a
of times.
smugness moment just for a couple
No,
of milliseconds.
right. But what's interesting, and it's quite striking to me that many of the things that I described in that book and in my blog that I had of the same name for many years, those structural conditions have really not changed a lot. We look at other factors that have impacted social and racial reckoning. We've had, obviously with the pandemic and the impact on that, just different way that the economy has changed, where there's more opportunity for people to do their own thing using free or very low fee
Hmm.
tools. But a lot of the fundamental principles about leadership and running organizations really have not changed. And I know, you and I have talked about that. I have a deep, enduring love for people coming together around a purpose. And it's funny, having written that book, many people might, leaders might be afraid of me, like I'm going to, come in to have a conversation and scare everybody away. I don't have a feeling at all that everybody should
Yeah,
work for themselves. In fact,
right.
in writing that book, I said people should either read it and say, oh, wow, it's easier than I thought, or they should read it and say, that's a lot of work. And I probably am more happy in my job. But a lot of the situations of not understanding the individual needs of employees, honestly, not creating more of this collaborative community-based approach and being very top down is part of what I think is driving the Great Resignation.
Yeah, and I'm seeing the same thing, and that need for community is as pivotal now as ever because the research around the loneliness that employees feel, the loneliness that leaders feel. MIT and Sloan did some research around something like 78% of leaders say they have a hard time forming social connections and strong relationships at work. Now, you talk about sort of in a community, for it to thrive, it needs sort of four things. It's got to be sort of safe, seen, heard, and honored. Tell us about your thinking around that and why those four characteristics are so critical.
Yeah, in a lot of the community building that I've done, it definitely has been within companies. So when I was doing work internally, there was always really looking at what are ways in which we are creating spaces where people can speak their mind, where you really understand individual interests and create an environment where people can have a conversation. So I saw that a lot inside companies. I remember one offsite I did for a company years ago with my former manager, who I ended up working with when I went independent 25 years ago. And we literally had to separate the leadership from the employees for the very beginning, first part of the project, because everybody was so afraid to actually
Right.
speak up and say what was really on their mind. And we had to remind them, no, leadership is actually really wanting to make a shift, but they did not feel safe. Their history said that if I actually speak my truth or any kind of discontent, I will lose my job or something bad's going to happen to me in my career. So I saw that in work in organizations. I saw that actually with work I did for 10 years in San Francisco, running a martial art organization as a volunteer executive director. I did a lot of work with youth. And I
Mhm.
found in working with them also that if you approach it of just, you're in a bad way, you need to join our program, and didn't respect them as individuals or really listen to what their lived experience was, you miss that opportunity for trust. And then I think through the years, I did online community building. And then here we have a learning lab, my husband and I do, for the last 5 years here in Mesa, Arizona. We really learn this value of taking lots of time to listen to people, to understand their personal history, to understand sometimes, I know, as a white woman, understanding that when people walk down Main Street, I can have a different experience based on the way the world reacts to me than I can if I'm a tall Black male, for example. So these are all things that when we use these principles to gather together, it helps us to actually get to a place of deeper connection and trust.
How do I apply this thinking and these ideas in my own role, where my community is my colleagues, my fellow employees, relationships I have with suppliers and vendors in our supply chain? What's your sense of how we can extend those ideas there?
The book is really structured around 10 steps in a method. So each step is a
Mhm.
chapter. And it really, by intention and design, it helps you look at things like, what really is this deeper mission at your root? In many large organizations I've worked with, over time, it's almost like the game of telephone. If you remember playing that as a kid, the founders might start, or the original team, with a very clear sense about why is it important for us to have this company? Why do we care about our customers? What's behind our product and service? How is that really meaningful and world changing? But over time, that gets lost if we don't continually gather and really get to the heart of why is it important to be doing this work. And then around values and mission, and there's been, Dilbert comics, people who have been in corporate a long time sometimes can develop a cynicism, sometimes for good reason. If it's an activity that's really taken lightheartedly and directly to the work you do, if there is no accountability for how it is that people connect with each other, then it can just be an exercise where an organization says they value things, but they really don't. When you have those shared conversations and you begin to look at the members of your community, look at opportunities for innovation, growth, even if you have your own organization, you do a bit of an ecosystem analysis of who's here and what is their point of view and how are they connected? What are new and creative ways that we might look at new opportunities within a company? That can be really exciting from a career development, career pathing perspective. When it comes directly into sales and marketing, there's a very direct implication and application of it. How can we really look at the market that are ideal customers, the ecosystem that they're in, and where might be some new opportunities for us to have partnerships. I'm seeing it more and more, which is, of course, very exciting. Lots of partnerships and new opportunities, lots of things, interestingly, with Web 3.0 and Bitcoin, and just a whole new way that the entrepreneurial world is looking at ecosystem and community. Those threads go all the way through everything that people are talking about for Web 3.0. What's so funny is I wasn't necessarily tuning into that when I was writing the book, because I was focused on the small business application, but it's very relevant for the way that we're looking at the future of technology in a business community.
When I got to the part of the book where you started to talk about the kind of leadership skills that you see that are going to be critical, I sort of sensed, I think Pam's got a little inner leadership geek in her as well, given your work, because obviously you work with entrepreneurs and leaders. So speak to those elements of the leadership skills you think that leaders are going to need to have to be successful in carrying out this work that you talk about.
Yeah, so this is what I see either in stages of business or sometimes when you are beginning to get into operating a different way. The first one is really just requires grit and determination, just, figuring things out in a world that feels very uncomfortable and unknown, and you just need to make things happen. Then there's a process of discernment, then the need for objectivity, and then the need for more courage. And the way I see this working is often, if you just look at the stages of growth within a company, at first, we've all been there, you just need to make things happen, need to get the product market fit, have sales, not so much a focus on operations. It's really just about having the wherewithal to get across the finish line every day. But once you do that and you begin to have a viable business, then there's a lot more of this discernment. What should we be doing? Who should we be hiring? What do we stand for? And really being able to step back, which is a point of resistance sometimes, of just slowing that acceleration and some of that addiction that we have to the quarterly results, and to say, are we really headed in the right direction? Is this a sustainable direction? And taking a little time to step back. The objectivity comes, I think, especially for leaders who I admire so much, who have really taken a stand and sometimes come out more clearly and publicly with introducing a new way of being, with stepping up and talking specifically about social issues. It is very common that you might get some pushback internally, externally. People do not hold back online, as all of us know. People are very clear about what they feel. And it's really important to learn how to accept that feedback with discernment, not take it personally, and develop very excellent listening skills for what about this is relevant and what about this is maybe just about what that person is going through. When you move forward of really making cutting edge change, of creating an organization that over time has an enduring legacy, I know you see this probably a lot with your clients. There can be a time where the courage required to get the organization through the next phase is you leaving it.
Yeah.
Or you stepping back, or you stepping into a totally different role, being comfortable
Yeah.
with actually seeing the leaders who you have developed thrive underneath you, and sometimes say, wow, they can probably do this better than I can. What's my
Yeah.
next phase? And that's often where it moves people into a new direction.
One question I ask all the time is to get kind of your perspective for young people who are joining the workforce for the first time. Some may have been in for a few years already. These are young future leaders we're going to be looking to help us solve our tough leadership challenges, our tough global challenges, our tough business challenges. And from your perspective, what words of wisdom or advice would you have for them?
I would say, on one hand, really trust your instincts, because a lot of what I see around young leaders that I work with, and I work with a lot of young leaders here locally and also as clients, is that there is a wonderful way, I think, that younger folks are being educated, socialized, the way that they really understand the world as being interconnected, sometimes because of just having phones in their hand from the time, that they begin to enter into the world of work. But I have such appreciation and insight often for just the natural leadership talent that I see around me. And sometimes folks of my generation, I'm 55, have been in business 25 years, and there could be folks that might feel threatened by a younger leader coming in, and sometimes that can cause the leader to question themselves, or maybe think that they don't have a valid perspective. Usually that perspective of pushback sometimes could be coming from saying, hey, I have actually been around a lot longer. This might be helpful for you to see. But other times it can just be that feeling, what we just talked about, requiring courage, where it
Yeah.
actually scares me that you are so competent and you just do things sometimes in an instant that it might take me longer to do. We need to have folks of different generations that within organizations that are looking at things differently, and to all have the courage to have conversations, to understand each other's perspective. And so in many ways, it's just to trust yourself. The last thing I'll say for a lot of younger folks always is, you never have to do it on your own. The sooner you learn how to ask for help, that will lead you very, very far.
So, is there anything else, as we close off, Pam, that you want to share around how people might be able to contact you or learn more about the work that you are doing? Because it's quite outstanding.
Yeah, so you can find me at pamelaslim.com is the best place. That's where you can contact me or have all my social channels. I say it in a lighthearted way, but I really mean it sincerely. Sometimes folks in larger organizations can be a little intimidated because I wrote Escape from Cubicle Nation. And one of the things that I have said for so many years in conversation is, I really love to have conversations with leaders where I can help share a perspective of now 15 years of having
Yeah.
conversations with so many talented people who, in some cases, are saying, I actually wanted to stay, but I left because I didn't see any possibility for change. And I just always
Yeah.
want leaders to know, I love the world of work, and I'm not anti-corporate or anti-organization. And I love to engage in those conversations. And I find places where I can have the conversation, especially in front of employees, can be a really strengthening perspective where you don't have to be afraid of hearing from people who have gone out on their own.
What I have found is among a lot of leaders and organizations, huge trepidation around the great resignation. And what I've said is, well, don't sit there hoping and praying that people are going to stay. Get on top of the issue.
Yeah.
Start having conversations around what's happening here, what's keeping you here, what's pulling you away, what can we be doing. To me, it's exactly not to not bring you in. It's like you can't afford not to bring you in, to start having those conversations. And you may find a way that by having that conversations, you just re-anchor people's commitment to, this is the place I want to be. And for others, it'll confirm, this has been great, but I need to go try something else right now. This is the moment in my career to do that. So I think, to your point, have the conversation, and you're a great person to help lead those discussions. So, okay, Pam, thanks so much for making time. I knew it was going to be an awesome conversation. Your book, The Widest Net, has tremendous insights and value for readers. So I encourage everyone to pick up a copy. And I wish you continued success, both with the book and with the amazing work you're doing with entrepreneurs and business leaders around the world. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.